Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining this session. I'm Nobue Amanuma from IGES, and I'll be your moderator. Let me share my screen. So this session will aim to answer this question. How can countries strengthen planning and action on the SDGs? And SDGs are to be achieved by the year 2030, and we are left with almost 8 to 9 more years to go. And so far, there has been a slow progress. In terms of the progress on some goals, if it's off track, and we definitely need to step up our efforts. And in doing that, the role of government is critical. So we have gathered here with 3 speakers from 3 different countries who are deeply involved in their national SDG planning and action. So with them, we will try to find answers to this question. So without further ado, I would like to introduce 3 speakers. Dr. Vivi Yulaswati, Senior Advisor to the Minister of National Development Planning, Indonesia. She is also the head of the National Secretariat for the SDGs in Indonesia. Thank you, Vivi, for joining us. And next, Ms. Sarah Kruger-Falk, Executive Director, Global Compact Network, Denmark. She is also the chairman for the 2030 panel. Thank you, Sarah, for joining us. And Mr. Atsushi Morita, Deputy Director, Global Issues Cooperation Division, International Cooperation Bureau of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Japan. In Japan, MOFA serves as the Secretariat of the SDGs Promotion Headquarters, which is led by the Prime Minister, and he has been on this team coordinating the production of the Japanese Voluntary National Review on the SDGs. Thank you, Morita-san, for joining us. So, before we start the discussion among speakers, I would like to provide the context of our session. So for some of you, SDGs might not be so, you might not be so familiar with it. So here are the basics of the SDGs. So it's basically a tool to tackle global challenges to realize a sustainable world. And it was adopted in 2015 at the UN. And as I mentioned, SDGs are to be achieved by the year 2030. And in Japan, at least, many people know the word SDGs, but not so many people know about the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And this is actually a longer document in which you can find SDGs. And it aims, it basically describes how SDGs should be implemented. And SDGs covers a variety of aspects, including economic, social, and environmental dimensions. And this points to the importance of integrated approach because there are many goals which are connected to each other. There is a growing understanding that we need to tackle many challenges at the same time. It's called integrated approach. And there are 17 goals, and underneath each goal, there are several targets. So in total, we have 169 targets. And we need to keep track of our progress. So in order to do that, we have 247 indicators. And one thing to note about the SDGs and the 2030 Agenda is that it's not legally binding. And it's not just government who needs to work on it, but it's also stakeholders who are encouraged to work on it. And this points to the importance of engaging stakeholders. And as I mentioned, we have a limited number of years to deliver the 2030 Agenda and SDGs, and the progress has been slow. So in 2019, the leaders from the world, around the world gathered together at the UN and decided that the decade up to 2030 will be called the Decade of Action. And they ask for transformative solution through accelerated efforts. So one might ask, what's the key for transformative solution? And as I mentioned, one important aspect is integrated approach. Another point is stakeholder engagement or inclusive approach. And in doing that, the role of government is critical. And for the government to enhance their planning and action on the SDGs is critical. That's why we have gathered here with people who have in-depth experience at the national level in SDG planning and action, so that we can learn from them, and also they can learn, they can share information among themselves. And I hope this becomes a peer learning opportunity. And just for your information, IGES has been conducting a lot of research on the SDGs, in particular related to national planning and action. So on the left-hand side, I have listed 2 studies which are related to integrated approach. The one on the top basically identifies which SDG goals and targets are connected in what way. But identification of these links alone is not really solve the problem. People have to take action. So in order to take action, we need to align different stakeholders' interests. So that's the second study at the bottom. And at the center, I have listed 2 studies related to action by different stakeholders. At the top, we have investigated government's approaches to the SDGs, including institutional setup and progress assessment method. And at the bottom, this is a study that we looked at Japanese business sector's approach to the SDGs. And finally, so integrated approach is basically how to plan your SDGs action, right? And then the yellow one, action by stakeholders, is about action. And once you take action, you have to review what you have done. So that's the green one, follow up and review. And as I mentioned, countries are encouraged to conduct voluntary national review to look back how much they have done and how well they can improve their approach in the future. So it's called Voluntary National Reviews, and many countries have produced this report, and we are analyzing these reports. And we also have looked at the environmental dimension of that. So this is the follow-up and review aspects. And these 3 aspects are the key for today's session. We will be asking speakers about their experience with integrated approach, stakeholder engagement, indicator development for review. And the speakers are coming from Denmark, Indonesia, Japan. One thing common among these 3 countries is that they presented their 2nd voluntary national review earlier this year. And they have shared their unique approaches from their national context. So basically, in this session, we'll be asking them, what are the keys to good practice and or challenge on integrated approach, indicator development, and stakeholder engagement? So I have asked the 3 speakers for their 1-word or a few-word response to all these 3 questions. So let me move to the first, their response to the first question. So I'll stop sharing my screen, and then you will see their responses. So Vivi from Indonesia said, for integrated approach, it's important to align national policy. And Japan and Denmark, surprisingly, they had the same answer, multi-stakeholder approach. So let me ask Vivi first to elaborate on her response. What do you mean by align with national policy? Vivi, can you unmute yourself? And by the way, we have limited time, so please respond in 2-3 minutes, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question and also the opportunity. Let me share the screen to directly shows about what I mean with the aligning with the national policy. So based on the presidential decree number 59, that's the foundations of the implementation of SDGs in Indonesia. By having that, we follow up to produce the roadmap toward 2030 agenda, in which we project some, we make some projections for each goal, and then do interlinkages analysis as well as the financing and the gap. So we can put on the concerted effort to align with the other stakeholders. And then we also have the provincial action, the national action plan as well as the provincial action plans to elaborate further the implementations for each province and the regions. And then some other guidelines, including on the monitoring and evaluations, reporting, and we produce the metadata and revise frequently. We just issued the second editions to not only educate the people about the indicators, SDG indicators, but also how to synchronize, to calibrate from the national indicators as well as the subnational. So we could try to build linkages between the output and the outcome as well as the impact indicators. Lastly, on the report, now we expand the participation to include the private entity. So the financing authority body issued a regulation for privates to issue the sustainability report annually. Now more than 130 businesses already issues the sustainability report. That's as a basis for us to collaborate further on how to localize the SDGs in many places in Indonesia. I'll stop here first. Thank you.
Thank you, Vivi. When I first read your response, I thought you're saying that SDGs need to be integrated into national documents, but you also mentioned the local level documents and private sector's document as well. So that was an interesting point. Thank you very much. And I would like to ask Morita-san, if you could elaborate on your response.
Thank you, Amanda-san, and also I thank all the colleagues of IGES for organizing this event and also inviting me to this event. As Amanda-san explained at the beginning, not only the government, but all the stakeholders need to play a role to achieve the SDGs. So in this area, we think multi-stakeholder approach is essential to achieve the SDGs. So let me explain how Japan, not only the national government, but Japan as a whole is promoting SDGs to achieve it by the 2030. So after the adoption of the 2030 agenda in 2015, Japan first built a foundation for its implementation by establishing the SDG promotion headquarters in May 2016, which was headed by the Prime Minister and composed of all cabinet ministers. The promotion headquarters decided to launch a roundtable meeting on the promotion of the SDGs in September 2016, which was composed of experts from a wide range of fields outside the government, including the private sector, civil society, academia, and international organizations. And based on intensive discussion in the roundtable meetings and comments from the public, the promotion headquarters formulated the SDGs implementation guiding principle in 2016 December, which set out Japan's medium to long-term strategy to achieve the SDGs. The framework, this kind of framework worked very well, we believe, especially in drafting the VNR. Early this year, the SDG promotion headquarters held a kickoff meeting for drafting the VNR, and all the ministries were instructed to submit inputs to the secretariat, which means my office of the headquarters. And in addition to the inputs from the ministries, we received inputs and comments from civil society organizations, groups of parliamentarians and youth groups. Then we had rounds of meetings of a working group composed of experts outside the government who were tasked to assess progress so that their assessment can also be included in the VNR. The VNR process was very challenging, especially due to the limited time, but we feel it was very useful, especially to promote and foster cooperation with multi-stakeholders and consider next steps to achieve the SDGs. The VNR gave us an opportunity to discuss with relevant stakeholders, especially with civil society organizations, not only the progress and the challenges, but steps following the VNR to accelerate action for achieving SDGs. So based on the assessment we received, such as the necessity of developing monitoring system, engaging with the youth in the discussion, and raising awareness of some SDGs issues such as the gender gap, we have now started and take steps to follow the VNR. Thank you.
Thank you, Morita-san. So you explained how multi-stakeholder approach has been critical in your VNR process and beyond. And I guess that with input from civil society, business sector, all these actors, you get a broader views to improve the integrated approach in Japan. Thank you so much. And Sarah, you had the same response as Morita-san. Could you elaborate on your response, your perspective?
Yes, yes. Hello, everyone. I'm Sarah Kruger-Falk. I'm the Executive Director of UN Global Compact Network Denmark, and I'm also the chairman of the 2030 panel. And I'm representing the 2030 panel today because we're a multi-stakeholder forum or a platform that works with actors from, we have 25 members from all parts of society. We have representatives from labor unions, municipalities, regions. I represent the UN. We also have another representative from UN representing UNDP. We have youth organizations, we have universities, we have think tanks. So we have a lot of members that have joined the 2030 panel. And what we do is that we support the political work of the Danish Parliament through a knowledge sharing. So we provide inputs and insights also to challenge the political system. And then we provide analysis and sparing. And the aim of us in the panel is to route to possible options and solutions in the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals. The goals involve all parts of society, so we need to involve everyone to take action, and we also need to look at our own actions from different actors and parts of society in order to really make a change in the whole society. So we hope that we, in the dialogue internally, can push ourselves, but also push the political system to a more holistic approach to reaching the 2030 agenda. So,
Thank you, Sarah.
yeah.
Continue.
Would you like me to continue?
Yeah, you can continue 1 more minute.
Okay. So one of the first steps for the integrated approach is to understand the linkages among the SDGs, because you can work with clean energy, setting up windmills, for example, but there will be challenges in the biodiversities in the seas. So you can always have some positive and some negative impacts on the Sustainable Development Goals. So we need a holistic approach, and we need to look at our positive and our negative impacts. We also need to find solutions through this multi-stakeholder approach so that we can help each other see a bigger picture, and also help each other to identify the blind spots and where we also need to step up and take more action. Another very important role of the 2030 panel is also to give a common understanding and to provide inputs to the parliament in the political discussions. When we have discussed issues, we put away our own narrow political objectives, and we make a more common statement that is more to the benefit of the whole society. And that has been an eye-opener for each and every one of us, and also in the dialogue with the political level. That requires a lot of compromise from all of us, but we can also see that it benefits the larger society when we do that, and when we challenge ourselves and we think out of our own narrow way of approaching some of the challenges we have. So it's easier for the politicians also, so they don't have to lobby and negotiate with all stakeholders individually, but they have this common panel of stakeholders representing a broad variety of stakeholders in society.
Thank you, Sarah. I think you brought up a new element to this discussion, which is about working with the political leaders. And that's something quite important to push this sustainable development agenda forward. And you also nicely connected the importance of identifying, the linkage among targets and goals, but also like try to shed light to it from a different angle of, people's voices and making the picture fuller. So yeah, thank you so much for that. So with that, we would like to move on to the second question, which is about indicators or follow-up and review. So many countries in Asia struggle with data and indicators, and some countries cannot even measure their baseline. So it's very difficult to measure progress without data. What do you think countries should consider if they're setting out or to define their own national SDG indicators? Please share some of your good practices or challenges. And for this question, we have again gathered their few words response. So let's share that, please. So Morita-san said progress monitoring is important. Bibi from Indonesia said align as many as possible all SDGs indicators and targets with national and subnational planning documents. And then Sarah said bottom-up inclusion. So we'll start with Morita-san. Could you elaborate on your response?
Thank you, Madam-san. I will explain, actually not a good example, but challenges we are currently facing. As Madam-san explained at the beginning, following the adoption of the 2030 Agenda SDG global indicators, now there are 247, was established in the UN to follow up the progress of the SDGs. The Japanese government is making efforts to show as much detailed data as possible for updating SDG global indicators. And we are planning to publish actually additional indicators in the coming weeks. We will continue our efforts to increase the number of available data for SDG global indicators. But it has been pointed out that SDG global indicators are not necessarily applicable to follow up the progress of the SDGs in Japan and some other countries. For example, some indicators are set following Millennium Development Goals, which mainly focus on the developing countries. And there are indicators, for example, malaria incidence per 1,000 population for global goal 3 that are not necessarily usable to follow up progress of all countries. Therefore, earlier this year, we asked IGES to conduct a research on the implementation system and the progress evaluation method of countries such as Sweden, Denmark, Germany, Finland, and France. Those are regarded as advanced countries on SDGs implementation. So taking this opportunity, I thank Amanuma-san especially, who was the chief editor of the report. And based on the IGES report, we found these countries set their own targets and indicators in addition to the SDG global indicators and have established a system for evaluating progress based on the circumstances of each country. In order to develop monitoring mechanism, we recently established a working group on monitoring progress and the promotion roundtable. This working group played a key role in drafting the VNR, and it continues discussion on indicators based on the findings from IGES report and also findings from the VNR. We will continue our discussion on how to set out our own targets, Japan's own target and indicators to reflect our domestic situation in coordination with multi-scale stakeholders. we also believe understanding good practices of other countries is beneficial in strengthening the implementation of the SDGs. So in this regard, we believe this webinar session is very useful to learn good examples from other countries. We will continue to strengthen our progress based on what we will learn at today's webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Morita-san, for candidly sharing your challenge with developing indicators at the national level. And I think you mentioned Denmark as a target country we study about their practice. So we will hear from Sarah soon. But before we move to Sarah, let's ask Vivi, could you elaborate on your response?
Yes. Let me share another slide to help my explanation. So we started to develop Indonesian metadata of the SDGs indicators because we are aware that actually the process from the one that we learn about the SDGs, we talk about 3 tiers of the indicators, meaning there are some indicators that still on the progress of development, be it at the method and also in the data itself. So we now already issue the 2nd edition of the indicators, the metadata, and try to use it as a benchmark also for national programs and projects. So if you could see here, in the metadata, currently the 2nd edition, we have 287 indicators. Why is it bigger than the global indicators? Because we have a proxy at the national level as well. So by having that, we align it with the midterm national development plan. In the last 5 years, so in the RPGMN 2015-2019, RPGMN is our medium-term national development. We align about 94 targets. But in the current RPGMN 2020-2024, we have more targets, meaning also more indicators that already align with the national programs and the projects. In this regard, annually in the government plan, we could save the progress through all the programs and projects by sectors, and we could also see the budget. Talking about the data itself, initially we mainly rely on our Central Bureau of Statistics. But after the COVID, we learned that we have to take an opportunity to learn more on the source of the data, like big data, utilizing the big data, for example. That's the thing that in the future, talking about the gap on the SDGs indicators, we need to optimize other methods as well as the sources. Particularly when we are talking about the indicators in or under goal 12, 13, 14, and 15. Actually, our Central Bureau of Statistics already stated that they don't have a capacity to build for those related data under those goals. But in fact, the data is not zero. There are some other, like in associations of the palm oil association, for example, or also some firms and so on. So we have to create a mechanism about how to collect, the method itself. Yeah. So I already asked to the Central Bureau of Statistics to build the method on the verifying of other methods. So the process for the indicator itself is need to be, iterative way, using the verifications and also applying through the collaborations with others. So I think within the next near future, speaking of the data, it's not only the domain of the government itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Vivi, for highlighting not just the role of government, but also the role of other stakeholders in data collection. Thank you so much. And next, I would like to ask Sarah to share your view. I know Denmark has conducted a very interesting exercise on this. Please.
Thank you. Yes, indeed. In Denmark, we rank very high on the international SDG indexes. But we can also see that from a Danish perspective, we're also part of the problem. Danish consumption and production is very, very high. We produce large amounts of waste every year. We have food waste and we have a large consumption of products that has been produced outside Danish borders. So in Denmark, the 2030 panel has, among other things, launched the world's first SDG baseline project that aims to establish an inclusive and supplementary Danish indicators on the status of the SDGs in Denmark. And I'm very proud because I actually have the report here. It's a very, very large report where we have made national indicators for each and every of the Sustainable Development Goals. As you know, Denmark is a rich country. We have a welfare system, so we don't have many stunted or poor people. But at the same time, we have poverty in Denmark, and we also have issues with inclusion and social instability, but we don't have stunted children. We don't have that many child deaths, but the challenges are others. So what we have tried to do with this project is to make the indicators relevant so that from a Danish perspective, we can also still see how we can push the borders and improve where we need to improve in Denmark. And what we did was that we raised money from some funds to make a consultation process in whole Denmark. So we made consultation processes in schools and in municipalities all over the country to get inputs from civil society, from universities, from businesses, and from actors all over society to help us identify what are relevant indicators in a Danish context. We also did this in very, very close collaboration with the Danish Statistics Denmark that collect statistics on everything in Denmark. And they had put some very concrete requirements on the data that we can collect, and that is that it's data that we can get access to. So all the indicators, we now have 178 indicators that are the Danish indicators for a more sustainable world. And we can actually collect them every year because Statistics Denmark are already getting this data. So this data can be used also to guide and monitor the political processes to see, are we on track? Are we still moving in the right direction, or are we going the wrong way? So that's the indicators, and we actually have them. We can send a link because they are also available in an English version on the Danish Statistics homepage.
Thank you, Sarah. I think it must have been a big exercise, like starting from raising money and then involving schools and municipalities, and must have been a challenge, but at the same time, it's quite impressive to see this big outcome. So thank you for sharing that.
A second side of this was also to mobilize the whole society to raise awareness about the Sustainable Development Goals, and to also raise awareness about all our own, to make it very concrete and specific to each and every one of us. Because if we want to make a drastic change, and if we want to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, we all need to take action. We need to take action as individual people on how we consume, how we throw out. We need to take action in our political work. We need to take action in our professional work, whether we are a university, whether we are a business, or whoever we are. We can all look at what we need to do, and that's the collective action we need to mobilize. So the whole process of collecting data was also a process of mobilizing society in also taking action.
Thank you. So I think you're highlighting the importance of, I mean, I don't know if it's good to call it side effect, but you ended up raising awareness among the participants of this exercise. So which also links to the final question about the stakeholder engagement, because you engaged a lot of stakeholders into the indicator development. So let's go, as I mentioned, the third question is about stakeholder engagement. We have collected their responses. Let's share the screen. And Sarah said constructive solution. Vivi said multi-stakeholder engagement at all levels. And then Morita-san says strengthening partnership. So let's continue with Sarah about your response. Could you elaborate on your response?
Sure. I think when we look at solutions, we need to look at how we can reach them together. And I think that's the big advantage with our 2030 panel and this multi-stakeholder approach, that if we agree on where to go and how to work, then we're all pushing in the same direction. And that's what we need to happen. If we all point fingers at the others and say, no, they have to do something different, then we tend to battle and it's not constructive. So we need to find a common way. We need to look at ourselves and also accept that we also play a role from each and every part of society, and then work together on a common solution. And I think that dialogue needs to be very constructive and solution-based and integrated. And I think we've really tried to also negotiate a common position on a broad number of recommendations for the politicians. And in that process, we all had to compromise. We couldn't get everything as we wanted from the business side that I represent. We also needed to listen to civil society and understand, okay, how can we make a proposal to the politicians where we agree on something? And what has been a great success for us is that we are now one voice. So the politicians listen to us. We're not political. We're not representing a specific stakeholder group, but we're actually representing a very common group of actors that want to make a difference for the world, to be more sustainable. And that makes it also easier for politicians from different political parties to take our recommendations and use them. And we can see that makes a difference, because they listen to us and they include some of our recommendations because it's so easy for them. It has already been debated, we've already discussed, and we've already compromised from our side. And I think that's a great advantage from us.
Thank you, Sarah. I think you mentioned a very important point. It's a solution-based dialogue and also compromise. And I think it's quite impressive that this grassroots dialogue come to good proposal for solutions, and that makes the work of politicians easier. And I guess at the end you get the benefit of it, because you work so hard to move the politicians in the right direction, and then you get the benefit of it.
I can give an example. We have two very good examples. When COVID closed down the country, we worked remotely. We were working from the computers, but we actually worked together to provide 39 ideas for specific political solutions that would build back better the country. And we send in these recommendations to the parliament, and it opened doors to the parliament because they got something very specific that they could work with, and that they could widely recognize and listen and collaborate with us, because we had already adjusted our recommendations among us. Mm-hmm. Another example is we made a debate when we celebrated the anniversary of the Sustainable Development Goals. We made a conference, and we had a climate debate where we invited, of course, some politicians, but we also had a young representative from Extinction Rebellion working on climate action. And then we had a representative from the largest Danish industry confederation And what was, people were quite amazed that we could get these two together in the same room to have a discussion. And what I think amazed the politician was how many things both the industry and the Extinction Rebellion young people were agreeing about. And I think our great role is not to build bridges or no, to separate people, but to find out where we have common wishes and where we can work together. And what we could see is that there were a lot of common points from many sides that the politicians could take and say, okay, the industry agree on this, Extinction Rebellion agree on this, let's go. And I think that was a success also.
Great, thank you so much for sharing the examples. Let's ask Vivi, you mentioned at all levels. Please elaborate on your response.
Yes, thank you. Again, I post the last slide. Okay, so the multi-stakeholder engagement in Indonesia, actually we have 4 platforms. The first is the government and the parliament, which the government consists also the local government, because we are a very decentralized country. And we have the 4th populous country in the world. So we have like a hierarchical mode in order to coordinate or to engage as many as possible. At the government and parliament, that's also including the national auditor body and also the ombudsman to ensure that no one left behind, or their tagline is the listen the unvoiced people. And during the VNR, for example, the national auditor body actually also do the process audit. So they see the consistency of all the indicators, not only across goals, but also across years. So they are really want to applying the framework of the SDGs in the audit. And I think in the global the global network, the Intosai, now also they expand many instruments to do more audits in many other projects. The second participation platform is on the philanthropy and businesses. So I think Sarah know some of my colleagues from the Indonesian Global Compact Networks. And also we have the FBI, the Philanthropy Business for SDGs. And also we work closely with the industry and the trade chambers in order to advocate as well as facilitating many events and having some capacity building actually, for example, in the term of the reporting with the GRI, using this GR standard, and also in the financing with, for example, the impact investing fund. The third platform is on the academia and also experts. So like I mentioned earlier, not only bringing some expert in expanding the mode of data sources, like using the big data, but also for the capacity building, particularly in the monitoring and evaluation and other resources. Now we already working together with 25 universities in 25 cities as a knowledge hub, not only with the academia, but also with the local government as well as private entities at the locals. Lastly, with the SDGs Academy. So this is only also the hub to expand the capacity. So now, along with the actions, we try to build the capacity, how to monitor, how to understand on the data, and also do some crunching, analyzing, and of course, seeking the gap, analyze the gap, so we can mitigate the risk and try to build collaborations. The lastly is on the CSO and also medias. The CSO including also the faith-based organization. So we now revising our national action plan to include also the format, not only for the local government, the businesses, but also the CSOs. We already include like around 415 CSOs to have or to identify their plan as well as their budget up until 2024. So in this regard, we could see the gap and do some analysis and see about the places that are still having a gap. So in this regard, we could build link and match with the CSR as well as other entities to accelerate the achievement of the SDGs. Yeah, I think that's all that I want to mention. Thank you.
Vivi. Did you want to share the how do you call it, the right hand side of the screen you just shared? You said the principle of partnership. Did you want to share that? Or no? Should I move on to the next? Sorry.
You mean the principles?
Yeah.
Yeah, actually we have the handbook for the multi-stakeholder engagement. And these principles is, of course, based on the involvement coming from them. So we have to build the trust, the mutual partnership, accountability, and mutual benefit. And there are some, performance indicators for doing that, that still need, again, back about the data, how to measure, talking about the capacity, how to analyze. But there are some good a good spirits that by having these principles, people know about the idea to collaborate. Because actually the SDGs, the idea of the SDGs that could be a framework for collaborations, it's understandable, but then how, that's another thing, because we need to calibrate on the measurement. Speaking of the data from the private and also from the partner, we are talking about different system, right? So the partnership based on these principles, it's really make it work when we are talking about the collaboration at the local level.
Yeah, I think, thank you so much. I think your point resonate with what Sarah just shared about like compromise and constructive solutions. So thank you so much. And we would like to move to Morita-san. Could you elaborate on your response?
Thank you. I respond that strengthening partnership is important. The reason is, as I responded to the first question, we believe multi-stakeholder approach is essential to achieve the SDGs. So in order to encourage all the stakeholders to take actions, and especially to take united action, we believe at first we should raise awareness on the SDGs. And also, after that, we should strengthen partnership so that we can work hand in hand with all the stakeholders. Now in Japan, more than 85% of executives are aware of the SDGs, and many of them wear the rainbow-colored SDG lapel pins on their chest. The ratio of Japanese local governments which were working on the promotion of SDGs jumped from about 1% in 2017 to 39.7% in 2020. The national government has committed to increase the ratio to more than 60% by the year 2024. Also, the SDGs have now become a boom among the younger generations as well, who will shoulder the future. We believe such great awareness and a series of steady efforts will be the greatest shortcut to achieve the SDGs by 2030. All people, including governments, local governments, businesses, NPOs, NGOs, and children need to work together to take concrete actions. It is also necessary to deepen international collaboration as well, building on the success we have achieved in each country and region. Through the VNR drafting process, we found that close cooperation with multi-stakeholders, especially involvement of public sector, civil society organization, and youth is essential to make progress for achieving the SDGs. In presenting the VNR of Japan this year to the high-level political forum of the United Nations in July this year, not only multi-stakeholders, civil societies participated in the discussion, and they also were included in our presentation headed by the foreign minister. So we believe through this process, we could strengthen our partnership with multi-stakeholders, and building on this step, we will take steps forward to accelerate actions for achieving the SDGs. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for highlighting how much awareness has been raised in Japan. And it's, I think Japan is going to raise more awareness. And I think that's a strength for strengthening partnership. So thank you so much for that. And we actually have several minutes for question and answers. And if audience, if you want to ask questions, please do that. And while we wait for the questions from the floor, speakers can ask questions to each other. We have heard a lot from each other. Do you have any specific question to specific people? Please raise your hand or just start speaking. Morita-san, please go ahead.
Thank you. I have a question actually to Sarah about indicators. And you said now there are 178 indicators for 17 goals, and which are based on Denmark's circumstances. So did you set up not only the indicators but goals specialized for Denmark, or you just created indicators? So this is my question.
Sarah, would you like to respond?
Yes, I'll try. I'm not sure that I heard everything because my computer was lagging a little bit, but I guess if the question was whether we set up specific Danish indicators and didn't only take the UN indicators, was that the question?
My question was, so you set up your local indicators, if my understanding is correct. And did you set up your local goals and targets?
That's a very, very good question. We have not set up goals and targets, but we are in collaboration with the Danish Ministry of Finance, because every year they're going to make a progress report on the development of the SDGs. And they've actually also, from the government side, provided a financing for some of our work in the 2030 panel. So what we will do is that we will make every year, we will make an update of this, where we track the progress of each of the indicators. And then we will make a report on the progress in Denmark and provide some suggestions of where we should head and what the goals should be. But we need to develop that. We didn't do that in the first, we started with the indicators, but I think the goal setting should be, we should work on each year and also make some recommendations. And of course, we are always focusing on the 17 goals. So the SDGs is the framework.
Thank you, Morita-san and Sarah, for great question and answer. Any questions? Other questions from the speakers to other speakers?
Can I respond to Morita questions in regard to Indonesia case? So at the planning stage, we have like more than hundreds of the projects each year done by each sector. So what we do is tagging the related projects that's achieve for or have or attend to achieve the SDGs targets as well as the indicators. So by having that, at the end we can track the progress as well as we can evaluate the performance of related sectors. We just issued the SDGs bond 2 months ago. Again, because we have the system of tagging, the SDGs tagging or the green tagging, we are later going have a blue tagging projects. So by having that, we could measure as well as evaluate the progress. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from any of you? Maybe we can go for another question. If not, we'll take a question from the floor, which was, I think that both Denmark and Indonesia has their own indicators beside the UN indicators. I'm wondering if Japan is considering doing the same thing, that is setting up their own indicators. I think Morita-san sort of touched upon it, but would you like to respond to this?
Sure. Now we are considering studying based on good examples of other countries, including Denmark and Indonesia and other countries. And also, as I mentioned before, we asked IJES to conduct a study on how other countries are doing with regard to the indicators and the following up mechanism. So based on that study and good examples, we are now working with other within the government and also with other stakeholders, especially under the SDG promotion roundtable. To set up and study whether it is feasible to set up Japan's own local indicators.
Yeah, thank you so much. So with that, we'll move to the wrap-up session. I would like to each of the speakers to share with us some of the takeaways or final message to the audience. So who would like to start? Maybe, well, Morita-san, would you like to start?
Okay. So my message is that what I learned in today's webinar is that now all the countries are working to achieve the SDGs. So in this regard, there are many issues we can learn from other countries. For example, Denmark and Indonesia, they are doing, for example, they have established their local indicators and they have set up their own mechanism. So it is good to learn from other countries and from other stakeholders to do so what they have done. So in this regard, today's webinar was very useful, and we will work to accelerate actions for achieving the SDGs. Thank you.
Thank you. And Sarah, would you like to go next?
Yes, I very much agree with what you just said, Morita-san. I think we have a lot to learn from listening to other countries. We can look at what's happening, but around the world and how you're approaching. But I also think we have many blind spots, and working with the SDGs is a process where we constantly have to look at ourselves and look at our challenges and where we are not very good to improve. And I think the only way to really move the targets is to constantly evaluate and learn from others. So I hope this is the beginning of a sharing experience where we can work more together and listen to how you're doing in other countries. So thank you for this.
Thank you, Sarah. Vivi, please.
Yes, thank you. Likewise, I was inspired with many other countries' experience, and I think SDGs is really a framework for collaboration. But how to collaborate is really up to us. So sharing, learning, I think we cannot only rely on or reinventing the wheel, but just start to share and think about how to make an acceleration so we can achieve all the SDGs targets on time.
Thank you, Vivi. And for me personally, today's session was quite useful. I learned something new. And for me, it was interesting to hear both Morita-san and Sarah providing the same answer to the first question about integrated approach, which was multi-stakeholder involvement or approach. And in terms of multi-stakeholder approach, Vivi and Sarah sort of provided the philosophy or principles on which we should conduct multi-stakeholder engagement. And as some of you mentioned, stakeholder engagement is not just within the country, but also collaborating with other countries. And I hope that today's session was one step in that direction. And I hope this is just the beginning, as Sarah mentioned. And I hope we can continue this kind of mutual learning. So with that, I would like to close. But before actually I close it, I have a few announcements to make. So this session is part of the ISAP. And then ISAP will continue until December 3rd. So please check out the program online and sign up for other sessions coming up and enjoy the sessions. And the final point is that there is going to be a questionnaire provided at the end of this session. So please take a bit of your time to answer this questionnaire. So with that, I would like to appreciate all the speakers and participants. Thank you so much for your time, and also the translators. Thank you so much. Thank you. And also IGES members, thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.